Welcome to the Wealth Juice Podcast, where we discuss all things real estate, personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and the many ways to achieve financial independence. We interview accomplished investors and entrepreneurs with the goal that their stories inspire you to take control of your financial future. Here to get your creative juices flowing while also documenting their own personal investing journeys are your hosts, Corey Jacobson and Ryan Bevilacqua.
Welcome back to the Wealth Juice Podcast. As always, it's your boys, Ryan and Corey, here with another episode for you. This week, we interviewed Brittney Kznaric. She is a real estate investor out of Pittsburgh, and she was previously a nurse, I guess still a licensed nurse, but converted into a real estate investor. And her strategy specifically is creative finance. She does a lot of different types of deals, ranging from sub to wraparound mortgages, seller financing. She even pays cash for some deals, and then does some rent to own. So we had a great chat with her. She's actually friends with some of our friends and coaches, Jen and Joe Delafave. They're great, but really got to dive into how to buy real estate into today's market where rates are high. People think there's a limited amount of inventory. They feel like they can't do a deal. It is not true. You have to get gritty, and there's strategic ways to leverage social media. And that's kind of the strategy we talked about, throughout the episode.
And Brittney mentioned she's a wife and a mother of two, so she has a lot going on in her life. And she's kind of used the phrase that we've heard a number of times with Coach Carson, small but mighty, right? So she has 16 units. She's working on some flips. She does rent to own. She has a short-term rental in it's called Skis and Teas, and it's in the Seven Springs area of just outside of Pittsburgh, like just southeast of Pittsburgh. So it's another like cabiny, mountainy feel similar to what we have in the Poconos. And she says she loves that. It's like the easiest property that she manages. Her goal is to get to like 30 units in the next few years, pay some off. So she's extremely relatable. And she puts out content that's like, hey, I'm here with the kids. I'm painting. She's known in Facebook groups as the local real estate investor. And she really stays true to that. Authentic, personable, likable. She's not corporate. She's just sharing her story, and it's the power of doing that. And we had a fun time talking to her, but we got into the details too. So this is an episode where it's like, how did you buy this property? I'm very curious to know. And she gave all the information at the end. She gives us her favorite deal. And it's like the rent to own strategy is so powerful. She left being a full-time nurse to be an investor, and this is what she loves to do. So she's living out her dream. Some days are better than others, but she's enjoying it.
It's just crazy what she's able to accomplish having two kids. And one, she told us about one of her deals when she just had given birth to her newborn and was already cranking out a deal. And I know it comes with personally now when it comes to having a kid and really how much limited time you have, right? And that's also managing a W-2, managing a podcast, managing a 30,000 person community, like a lot of different things, right? And she's just like unbelievable what she's been able to accomplish. So if you listen to the episode and you are like, whoa, I need to get into creative finance, or at least I want to learn more about it. She's a product of Jen and Joe Delafave. She mentioned she worked for them for years. They're in our network. We're really close with them. We actually kind of partnered up with them. If you are interested in joining their program, or at least hearing more about it, go to our YouTube channel. That's at Wealth Juice Official. And you can click on any one of our most recent videos. And in the description, there'll be a link. Jen and Joe will give you a little discount for joining from the boys. So if you're interested, feel free to head on over there. But other than that, hopefully you can soak in some more episodes from us, because we are posting all of our previous episodes on YouTube, growing that rigorously. And yeah, man, I don't know if I missed anything.
No, you didn't. This was a great episode. A lot of fun. We interviewed somebody who's doing deals today. Not that they did it years ago. She's doing it. She's in a small market. It's possible near you. She makes it sound easy. It's not, but listen in and get soak up a lot of information. So let's get started.
Let's do it. Brittney, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice Podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show today. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So if you could, I like to start here. Just take us a little bit before real estate, before you became an investor. What were you doing? And then when did that light bulb moment hit you where you're like, whoa, I want to become a real estate investor?
Sure. So I think it really started after I had my first baby, my son. Prior to real estate, I was a registered nurse. I still am a nurse. And I worked in an emergency department for about 9 years, I think it was. And I worked my way up to a manager. And fun thing about ERs, for those who don't know, is you can never turn patients away, no matter how many call-ups you have and how crazy you are. So it's a very hectic job for a new mom with a little baby at home. And I remember one night I was sitting in my son's room, like I had just worked a 12-hour shift. I was rocking him to sleep. And I got this phone call from the department, and they were like, hey, we have all these traumas coming in. We don't have enough people. We need help. So I literally had to like hand my son off to my husband. I still had my scrubs on, I think. And I just like got in the car and went back to work and worked like half the night, even though I just worked 12-hour days. So just kind of a combination of all these crazy hours I was working. I didn't feel like I was home or spending enough time with my family. And so I started looking into ways to limit our expenses. And, you know, we tried, like, we were always pretty good about not having debt, but we were like, okay, maybe if we pay off our house, or maybe we do this, we have a little less bills, you know, that would help. And then after having my second baby, my daughter, about 2.5 years later, my husband started getting really interested in real estate. And I had no clue about like how real estate affected your life in any way. But yeah, we started looking into that, and we just decided it was time to move on to something better. And here we are today.
So let me ask you this, Brittney, did you drop one thing and move to the other thing? Or was there any time in between where you were like doing what you were previously doing and then getting into real estate? And I asked that sort of selfishly. Ryan and I are at an inflection point in our careers and our journey that we'll talk about in an upcoming episode here. But like for a long time, it was doing both at the same time. So I'm very curious about that.
Oh yeah, I did it all at the same time. So funny enough, the getting into real estate part happened as I was driving to the hospital to have my daughter. So we were dropping my son off at my sister-in-law's, and the house next door to her was for sale, and it was my husband's family home. They like owned like a couple houses on the same street, and the girl that was living there was like, I really don't want to move. They're selling. And so he was like, we should buy this house. It would be a great way to get started. We already have a tenant in place. And I was like, okay, well, let's go have the baby, and then, you know, then we'll talk about this after. And so a week later, we're talking, you know, with our family. We called the owners, and they had already been under contract. And so we were like, okay, that's not going to work. And then maybe like a week later, we went to a party, and we saw a childhood friend who was a real estate investor. And he was like the only one we knew that did real estate. And he's like, why haven't you done it yet? What are you guys waiting for? And so so we started doing research, you know, like how do I buy a rental property? And there really wasn't much out at that time. And that was back in 2018. And so we just found a realtor. We just started looking at properties, and we did it all. The first property we bought, my husband was working like 7/12, so he was working crazy. I was still working at the hospital, but only part-time at that point. And I did that for probably about 3 years before I fully transitioned into real estate full-time. So it was just total chaos for a while.
Got it. Well, the amount of hours that you were working, right, and all the things that you were doing probably made it pretty difficult. I'm very curious about your strategy as you started. So one thing to get into real estate, another thing to pick the lane and what strategy and how to figure all that out. I mean, it doesn't even sound like you had a lot of time to like do a bunch of research prior to. Maybe you did, but what was the strategy that you decided when you jumped in, and why was that what you picked?
So we live in like south of Pittsburgh, PA. And it's a very sort of blue collar middle class area where we grew up. And so the houses here, compared to most places in the country, are fairly cheap. So basically, my initial strategy, or now would be lack thereof, because it really wasn't a strategy, was let's find a house that like doesn't need a ton of work, that if we completely fail everything and do everything wrong, that we can still afford to pay the mortgage and the bills off of like, you know, what we're like our salary or whatever. So like, I didn't even understand running numbers. Like I knew nothing. I just said, as long as we can afford the mortgage, we'll be okay. And that's literally how we started. I knew nothing else, like nothing.
Wow. So Corey, I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but Brittney, I know that you do today, I'm fast forwarding a bit and then you can catch us up and fill the blanks in. You do a lot of creative financing and buying real estate with low and no money down. And I want to highlight that early on in the episode for people to really grasp what the episode's really going to be about, because we hear constantly, it's 2024 when this episode is coming out, and a lot of people complain about rates being too high and they can't get in and there's not enough properties. And it's like, they're really like not the abundance mindset. They're really on like the limiting beliefs. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of demystify this for us and just give us a little bit of your strategy, how you went from being scared, having no properties, having your firstborn. And trust me, I know that all that comes with that now. I mentioned this to you before the recording. I have a 16-month-old and my house is chaos and I have one, you have two. So I'm like, the fact that you're basically Superwoman over here, but I want you to be able to take us through creative finance and how you're able to secure properties in today's market, because I think it'll motivate a lot of people to realize like they can get into real estate still today and can change their life.
Yeah, for sure. So I think buying the first house was a huge lesson. It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know until you do it and you make a lot of mistakes and then you figure it out. So we were doing a lot of like, what they call the BRRRR strategy at first. And, we learned what that was and it was fine. It was good. But, you weren't making as much cash flow. And then, with the rates going up, it makes it even harder. So I had always heard people talk about like seller financing and this and that. And I was like asking all these people, like I started going to meetups and anywhere I went, I was like, hey, do you know about this seller financing stuff? Like, I don't even know who to talk to about it. And everyone was like, oh no, that's so complicated. That's so this, that's so that. And I'm just like, whatever, like at some point I'm going to find somebody that understands this stuff. And it took until COVID, 2020, when we couldn't go anywhere. So I started going to virtual meetups and I stumbled upon Jen and Joe Delafave. They were in this virtual meetup and they just sort of took the stage and were talking all about creative financing. And I didn't even know you could take over mortgages at that point. I had just heard of seller financing where you just make payments to the seller. And so after this meeting, this is before they had a coaching program. Like this is before they, really were like super big on social media. I was like, I want to be your friend. I don't know what I got to do, but like, I need to know what you guys are doing because you're the first person I met that actually does this stuff. And so we became friends and I ended up working on their team. And, obviously I could talk about that. But getting back to your initial question. So yes, I do lots of creative financing now. And my strategy is honestly just very straightforward with people. So we're very focused in our market. We buy in like 4 different areas, not too far from where we grew up and where we currently live. So we're very familiar with our market and we very much hone in on being a local family-owned business. And so we don't do we don't do any paid marketing. It's all organic. I mean, we do offer referral fees, but that's after the fact. So basically what I do is I go and meet with people and I say, I'm going to come out, I'm going to look at your house, I'm going to get some information, and then I'm going to give you a couple different options. And I sort of just vaguely talk through what those look like. And they're like, what do you mean you're going to give me options? And I say, well, number one is we buy cash. That's obviously the easiest, most quickest way. But I will warn you, that's typically going to be my lowest offer. But what's nice about working with me is that I have other options where I can pay you a little bit more money and we just pay you, over time. And so I basically almost fully explain to them everything. I'm like, look, here's why this works, okay? I'm either going to have to go to a bank. I'm going to have to borrow money from them at a super high interest rate. And then because of that, I'm going to have to pay a lot less money to you. So if I can cut the bank out of the deal and, not have to pay these crazy high interest rates, I could pay more money, directly to you. And I sort of word it like that to them. And then it is like that little light bulb that clicks and they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, I just keep it really simple with them. And sometimes I even say, hey, like I just had a call with a seller today. She was a childhood friend and her situation just didn't make sense for me and for her. And I basically was like, look, here's all the things I can offer, but I don't really think any of this is going to work for you. And, I think you should go and list it on the market. So I try to be very honest with people and I think they appreciate that.
Can you talk to us about those options that you have? I think people think sub 2, owner financing, then there's some rent to own. Curious on exactly what you have on the silver platter that you can offer up to people if you do think it's a right fit before sending them to the bank.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of it depends on our exit strategy. So I sort of have to start at the end and work my way back. If it's a house where, like, just to give you an example of one that didn't work and why it didn't work. So I went to look at this house last week and it was a really nice house, very well put together, like didn't need a lot of work, you know, it was fairly turnkey. Um, the price that she wanted for it, I wouldn't even come close to cash flowing if I were to do conventional financing. So it just didn't make sense. But she had bought the house many years ago and she only owed about 40,000 on it. And the house, she wanted to sell it for about 150. And they're looking to build or buy a new house soon, and they need that money to fund their next property. So if I wanted to get super, super technical and do all these crazy things, I could look at taking over her debt subject to and making her payments for the rest. And if she were in a position where she was a little bit more, I don't want to say desperate, but like a little bit more in need of assistance, I could have certainly given her some options of doing that, where either I have her fund the down payment or I have her fund a portion and then I go and get a DSCR loan for the rest, which is another deal that I did recently. Or I could look at taking over her mortgage, but then I'd have to come up with the other cash to get her money down. So it didn't make sense. And it was in good enough shape that I know if she listed it on the market, she'd get an offer that would be way more simpler for her. So that's just kind of one situation. But then, you know, the winners or the ones that do work a lot of times are people who own their homes free and clear. I do a lot more seller financing than I really do wrap mortgages and subject to, just because in my area, a lot of houses we buy are elderly people and they have their houses paid off. And so normally, depending on my exit strategy, if it's something I think I'd hold on to for a longer term, I'll offer kind of like a really long-term seller financing and then maybe like a shorter term at a lesser price. And then I always give a cash offer. So usually you're looking at about 2 to 3 options.
So I think the psychology, Brittney, about offering multiple options gives people peace of mind. Like, oh, I do have options, and it's not somebody that's coming to me like trying to not nickel and dime, but get my property at 60 cents on the dollar, right, or 50 cents on the dollar. And I think even just getting that presented to them, it kind of softens it. So I love that you do that. Earlier, you were talking about how you went and, you know, you're like, I meet with people, right? But I think we skipped the part how you get to the properties. And that's what I want to figure out. Like, how do you get the people to meet with? And you mentioned before we started recording that it was a lot of like Facebook ads and like, just explain the process, your marketing strategy. So how the deals actually come to you. Is that correct?
For the most part, yeah. So back in the day when we first got started, I found a lot of deals on like Facebook Marketplace. And I still wonder now, like, I don't know if it was just because I wasn't as involved in real estate, but I feel like investing has become so much more of like a thing in the last few years than it was when I started, because I could just like find houses on Marketplace and it was great. But as time has gone on, you know, things have changed. So a few years ago, my husband and I decided that we wanted to make this like our full-time thing. We want to be full on real estate. And at that point, we were doing maybe a few houses a year. It wasn't anything crazy. And I was like, okay, how are we going to make this a full-time thing? You know, like what's the best strategy to do? And Jen actually had been bugging me for many years. She's like, you got to start sharing what you do on Facebook. And I was like, I don't want to. I don't want people to know my business. And it just kind of hit a point it one day. And I was like, all right, if we're going to make this work, I have to start talking about what we're doing. And so I made a Facebook business page and I just started sharing like, so, you know, obviously I said we have 2 kids. They come to the properties with us. They help us fix them up. Like we're true on, you know, family, like fixing these houses up. And I just would start telling stories about like, oh, hey, we're at the house today with the kids. My son's helping my husband put flooring in, and just keeping it like super casual. Like I'm not doing any crazy posts, any super fancy stuff. It's just like the real deal. Here's what we're doing on the weekends. And, you know, it took a while. It probably took about a full year before we really started getting any traction. But now people see us getting tagged in posts, and people see like more people that we know that we're buying houses. So they'll tag us and stuff. And we share all of our posts to like local pages on Facebook. So it's just a combination of all of those things. And then as far as the advertising goes, though, we don't pay for any Facebook ads. It's just all sharing. And then we do advertise that we'll pay a $1,000 referral fee if someone recommends a house to us and we buy it. So that has been great. We've paid a few referral fees out the last few years. And, but yeah, everything has just been coming to us by just sharing our story, being an open book. And I think people appreciate that we are local. We're not some like scary big investor company out there trying to steal houses, like we're just trying to make our communities better, that our kids are going to school in and all of that. So people like that.
So on the Facebook, oh god. So basically on the Facebook group, are you advertising that you're a mom and pop shop that buys properties XYZ way, or is it just kind of like you and your husband doing this together? Like you're just like renovating properties. I'm curious on the front facing, and I have a couple questions like as we go through.
So we do a couple different things. We will post in local groups and just say, hey, we're husband and wife. We're looking to buy some properties this month. We don't ever say it in a way that someone would think that we're buying it for ourselves. Like we say we're looking to buy a few houses that are not market ready or whatever the case may be. It's nothing, we don't advertise in any way that we're looking for ourselves. And then as far as our Facebook posts go, a lot of it is usually just kind of like before and after videos, or like we'll do, if we all spend a day working at a house, I just do little candid shots of like us and the kids cleaning up or doing whatever, and then we just say, hey, like we're looking to buy houses, we're local, and we share them on our page, and then we'll share the post to like all the local community pages that we invest in. So that's probably the two most like
those are your strategies.
Yeah.
So when you are basically sending these into the community pages without it looking spammy, like how do you go about doing that? Is it just kind of like, here's an update, or like follow us for this? How do you kind of propose that to people?
So now at this point in our business, about 2 years ago, I hired a virtual assistant. And so she helps me with a lot of posting. In the beginning, I did it all myself, but now, I've gotten to a point where I do delegate some things out. So one of her roles in the business is that she goes into the local pages and she just comments on other people's stuff. So like all of our local businesses in combination with that. So if me and my husband stop and get coffee and take it to the house for like the workers or whatever, I'll go on our business page and I'll say, oh, we got coffee for the crew today, and I'll tag the local business and things like that. So, in the beginning, we still get spam, but the nice thing is that because we share it so much, people that we know will come in and like defend us, and they'll be like, they're not scammers, they're our friends, and they do a great job, which, I'm like, boost that algorithm. Keep saying stuff.
No, it's really smart. It's really smart. I have one last thing, and I'll let Corey take this over, but because I feel like I'm hijacking a little bit. But we have our Instagram. We have built a community of about like 30,000 people, but a lot of our posts are about the mindset of real estate investing, some of what we've done in the past, right? But like we collaborate with a lot of people, and it's sharing our story in a different way. We're not posting ourselves physically in the properties all the time, but like talking tips, tricks, what we've learned, what to avoid, sharing the podcast and all other people's stories too. My thought is Instagram makes it very easy to share posts on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We don't really post on it at all, but at some point here, Corey and I are going to look to be expanding our portfolio, and we were dabbling into the creative finance side of things. What we found was we paid a VA to go make cold calls, and then when we get on the calls with the actual sellers, it was a lot like we were the 30th person they've already talked to, and they were like sick of it. And they're like, dude, like I'm done with it. I'm sick of you people, and we're like, damn, like doing this coinciding with our W-2 jobs, we're like, dude, we cannot do this. We couldn't withstand the workload. And then the amount of dollars we were putting into marketing and advertising to get out there, we ran out of money. And it was like, dude, like we can't sustain this. So, i.e. Jen and Joe came in and we were kind of talking through Facebook strategies. So my thoughts are curious on this. And I'm wondering if you can kind of give me some insight. Do you think it would make sense for us to revamp this or make a Facebook page for specifically like the wealth juice, right? Exactly what we have for Instagram, and just start posting exactly what we post on Instagram, then maybe hire a VA to jump into these groups and say, we're looking to buy? Or do you think we'll come off as this, these gurus or these people that are like, it's just a company coming to buy properties? Because I know there's a couple ways to do it. I'm just wondering if we can leverage kind of what we've already built and come off, in a kind of a strategic way. Because at some point, I think we are going to want to dive back into this thing full time outside of our coaching program. And I'm just curious your thoughts.
So I would say, and this is this is a combination of my personal experience and then what I've seen from other people. I think that if you're focusing on a few, maybe 1 to 2 specific markets, I think it definitely can be beneficial because people get to know you and they get to see your posts regularly. If you're doing it in a large market, I don't necessarily think it's going to work that well. I think you will come off as that. But the feedback that I get from most people is they just like to see the authenticness. So it's like, you have all these crazy like editing things and this and that, but at the end of the day, like the comments I get the most on are most like real, like not, we all look a hot mess, we're covered in paint, and like people relate more to that than they do if it's all done up super professional because they feel like they can relate to you. So I'd say if you guys are going to stick to a couple markets, it will probably work. But just make sure that, you're staying authentic and people see, you and I forget if you said you had a daughter or son, but like on phone calls with my baby, like people like that stuff,
That's cute. Yeah, no, that's good feedback. I think there's a way to tastefully do it, and we would be in one market or like 1 or 2, but like local to Philly, and I think it could work. And it's just what I'm finding is social media is the way we found so much success in our business for this, and so it's like why would we not leverage that when we're physically buying properties different way? But I appreciate the insight. I think it's super helpful, and another reason for social media is like you're finding the people, like there's a certain age group. A lot of people that own homes are on Facebook, that older generation. And
I was gonna say, Instagram is not where it's at when it comes to this kind of stuff. Facebook,
no. Yeah. So it's something we kind of like, it's looming on us a little bit. Like we should be doing this, but we're focused fully on Instagram for our coaching business, where that's where a lot of the people that want to get there first are living. So it's just interesting. We're navigating, but great insight. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I have here, Brittney, starts with a question and then I'll lead to a comment, but what does your portfolio look like now? Just so that everyone who's listening, we kind of went through this, but what does it look like? And then I'll kind of ask a question to dissect that a little bit.
Sure. So right now we have 16 long-term units. They're pretty much all single family, except we do have 1 duplex. So single family is just kind of like our bread and butter. It's what we get the most leads on, and we just try to stick with what we know. We also have a Airbnb in a mountain resort or a ski resort, mountain resort, about an hour from our house. And we have 1 flip that we're actually getting ready to list on Thursday. And we have 3 properties under contract right now that we're closing on in a few weeks.
Love it. So you are the perfect example of putting your message into the universe and then it returning tenfold. And I say that because you're not saying that you have this incredible marketing budget that you're spending money on. You don't have this robust, like massive team behind you. But what you have is, I'm a real estate investor. That's what I want to do. And now people know you as that. And all that is the power of the world being flat in social media. And I think, we talked about this before, you got on, is that you're like, it can be overwhelming. You're like, I need to take a little bit of a social media detox, right? But it's interesting that you have been able to create all these connections and meet all these people and become an authority figure, a big fish in a small pond, by using social media. And I think it's as long as you can find the balance, it's extremely powerful. So I just wanted to give you some props there because I think it's pretty cool. Sure. Yeah. So the next question I have is about your Airbnb and like why you decided to break off into this, because I would not call it shiny object syndrome for us. We love short-term rentals, but it's a different avenue. It's a different business. It's completely different than managing long-term tenants. You're in the hospitality business and you're a super host at that. So talk about skis and teas. I don't know a lot about Seven Springs Resort, but or Seven Springs, PA. I do know that it is southeast of Pittsburgh. So talk to us about how you got into this property. Was it another property that you kind of came across and decided, hey, I think people would love this? Or was it that the plan from the start?
So it was definitely the plan from the start. So for us, like, we're not looking to grow some huge empire. I'm like, I want to be like a small but mighty team. I want to own a decent portfolio that I can slowly pay off and like live on. And then the Airbnb situation, or short-term rental, I guess I should say, I always call it Airbnb. We like to travel and we want to have Airbnbs in places that we like to go. And to be quite honest with you, the first couple years of investing, we went from one house to the next, and we did everything ourselves. And we were so freaking burnt out after a while that we were like, we need something we can enjoy. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but me and my husband Sean's first date was seeing the movie Hot Tub Time Machine. Have you guys ever seen that? And so
I've seen it.
We grew up going to Seven Springs. Like, you know, that was just the place to go because it's like an hour away. And we always said when we first started dating, so Hot Tub Time Machine's about them going to this like resort and, you know, going back in time, whatever. And so it was just like always our thing. Like we wanted to have a place in the mountains that we could go with the kids and whatever. And yeah, we were burnt out and we were like, it's time.
Got it. Cool. So what are the differences that you see between the projects that you've done in the short term and or maybe it's just the one, and then the long term? How does that business differ? Because managing one Airbnb can be close to a full-time thing. And, you know, you can put systems that it makes it not, but my point is like, if you're the actual host and you got to answer messages, like what do you do to manage that without, you know, having it overlap too much into the rest of your business?
So my short-term rental is honestly the easiest property I have. I'm all about like the things that get me excited in real estate are like automation, delegation. How can I systemize something and do the least amount possible, but make it effective? And so when we went to get into this, I just started doing research and like learning from different people. I actually bought like a little mini course on short-term rentals, and it was how to automate. And so I have two apps that I use. One is called Hospitable and the other is called Price Labs. And basically it allows you to almost automate everything. So I think short-term rentals are a lot of upfront work. If you put in the work up front, it will do well long-term. And really long-term rentals are the same way. So just some things that I did is, first of all, I stayed there for quite some time to make sure that everything was there that I would want as a wife, a mom, whatever. Like I want people to come there and be able to fully relax with everything they need. And so I use these to send automatic messages. So like very rarely do I actually have to go in and message anyone unless I'm just answering a question. So that's one big thing I use. Price Labs is an automation tool for pricing, dynamic pricing. I don't like to use Airbnbs because, you know, they just want to get people on there. They don't care how much they're spending. So Price Labs is nice because I can set minimums. I can set different seasonal or a very seasonal type of short-term rental. So I can set seasonal pricing, and those basically run everything. So very rarely do I do anything. It sends messages to my cleaners, messages to my VA. She updates the lock codes and all of that stuff. And then another thing that I did is in the beginning, anything at our place that like needed instruction, we wrote down instructions, and then we also took videos of doing them and made a little YouTube channel that's just for our guests. They can scan a QR code. It's right there, like on the mantle. And it'll say like, here's how you operate the fireplace. Here's how you operate this. And so they obviously can reach out to me at any time, but they don't have to. They can just click on this stuff and it's pretty much all there for them to just see at their own leisure if they need it. So that's been a really big help.
That's the best way to do it. I mean, I think there's a sweet spot in the management of Airbnbs. I've noticed that the time and attention it takes, like once you start getting into that VA realm where you have 60, 70 plus units, it becomes a little bit less personalized.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan and I own a company. We have a minority stake in a company that is grown significantly. And there's a lot of growing pains and challenges about how to manage that efficiently. We had on, I believe it would be last week's episode at this point, Bill Faith, who owns 25, could be more, super properties. And he says that for every property, he sends a personalized message of his face, like a FaceTime kind of thing, to these people. So it really is the personal touch that gets, in my opinion, the best reviews. You'll find that it'll, depending upon the bed count, it'll get the highest nightly rate and just like longevity over the long term. So very cool. I love that. I'm curious if you have any future goals with your business. You mentioned this a second ago, how you like, you don't need to be massive, small but mighty. And we love that because Chad Carson felt like he coined that term for us, like small but mighty. That's the name of his book. But what are you looking to do in the next, I don't know, 1 to 3, 3 to 5 years. It's really hard to do what you've done. And you're authentic about it. And I think that's the best part of it, is that you bring your kids involved, like you show the real side of it. That's what's important. But again, we're on this podcast, somebody's listening that have no units. So I'm curious on I'll get to that question next, but what are your goals with this whole thing?
So my goals change all the time. I'm terrible at setting goals and sticking to them. I think right now what we're focusing on, so now that we do this full time, we have to look at it very differently. We don't have enough rentals that can sustain our livelihood. It's just, we're not there yet. So right now we do sort of a compilation of things. We do long-term rentals, and I look at that as more of long-term wealth, retirement, that kind of stuff. You still make money on them, but it's nothing crazy. We just started getting into the rent-to-own strategy, which is a nice medium. You get a nice upfront amount of cash, but then, you're selling them a few years down the road. And then we also started doing some fix and flips, which I like doing, but it's not something I want to do on a regular basis, but that's kind of what pays the bills. That's today's money. So what I would ideally like to do is get to a point where we're buying enough rentals that we can live off of that, and then do projects more or less picking and choosing ones that we really want to do. If we want to take on a flip, we can. If we want to go buy another, we want to buy a short-term rental somewhere warm. But that's really the long-term goal is with that. So we're focusing right now on buying quality properties. We do still utilize the BRRRR strategy in some aspects because it still works for us. We may not cash flow a ton, but we're buying at a really good price and we're still cash flowing a little bit. So if and when the time comes that the rates do drop, we can refinance. If not, we're still slowly climbing and increasing that cash flow. But I would say I would probably like to own maybe 30 to 40 doors and then start paying them down and just, simplifying. I don't want some crazy business. I like having the personal touch. I like being able to go out to properties and meet the sellers. And, I have them, sometimes they want to come back and see the house when we're done because they're all excited because they've seen other houses that we've done. I like that personalness, and I don't want to get too big or too crazy to where I can't still do that.
I like that a lot. It's really cool. We've tried a lot of different strategies, and we've kind of come back to square one where we really like the long-term rental game. And it's just figuring out your exit strategies and putting it together. And I think the small but mighty is the way to go, truly, because you only have a certain amount of energy, right? You're going to have to hire so many other people to help you manage things. And if you want to keep it all manageable to yourself and just not overwhelm yourself and there's so many different ways you can construct this thing for the long time. And we found that the further you go and the bigger you build it, the more stress that comes with it and the more problems that come with it. And so it's finding that happy medium. And I think that a lot of people are trying to find that happy medium. I don't know exactly what it is. We have to try things to learn what you like. You might love this rent to own option. Be we're just going to keep doing that. This is amazing. We can pay off these properties much quicker. So I think it's really important to bring up. And I appreciate you sharing this. I think most of the questions were answered for me. One, I kind of just lost it, so I'll kick to you.
That's all right. Let me go into it. So I think I want to know, let's say you were talking to your 18-year-old self or somebody that was just starting, Brittney, there's a big inflection point in a lot of people's lives. They either want to change careers, they want to get into real estate investing, they don't know how, or maybe they just want to start their own thing or their own business. And you've done that. I'm curious about advice you would give to your younger self. It doesn't have to be your 18-year-old self, but when you first started this, knowing what you know now, what would you give advice if your younger self was listening?
So I think the biggest thing that helped me was finding other like-minded people. So going to local networking events and, online ones are cool. Obviously, I've met a lot of really great people on them, but meeting people in person is just a different level, and having those friends around you. Because when we first got started, we knew nobody that was doing it except for, like I said, that guy. And it's lonely. You're already questioning if this is the right thing to do. And then everyone else is oh, I don't want people calling me in the middle of the night for a broken toilet. And you're well, I don't know if I do either, but I'm going to try. And it's
Yep.
You need to be around people that get that and that are going to help push you on the days when everything sucks and everything's breaking. So I think that's number one. And actually, about 2 years ago, I ended up starting my own meetup, and that's like just changed everything. I've gotten so many more friends, I've helped so many people, which is great. So, definitely having good people around you. And then your first property, and this is sort of what I did, I guess, in a way, is you just have to look at your first property as like your real estate college tuition, is how I look at it. And it's like, figure out the worst case scenario that can happen. And if you can come up with an exit strategy to get out of that, it probably won't happen, but don't try to get like a slam dunk. Like, as long as you are at least cash flowing, you're not negative, you're not buying this house that's going to take 25 years to renovate, like that's the only way you're going to learn. You can analyze forever and ever, but until you actually go and buy a house, you're just, I could tell all kinds of horror stories from my first couple of properties, but it's brought me here. So you can't be scared to fail, but if you have good people around you that will help you when you're struggling, that it helps.
I couldn't agree more. I think when I first started, and this is part of the reason why Ryan and I started this coaching program, when I first started, I tell the story sometimes, like it was like my property, it was raining in the windows during a thunderstorm. Like literally, like I got a message from my tenant, and it was like pouring into the house, my first property. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is the worst decision I ever made in my entire life. And I'm calling a random guy who I've met 3 times who was like, you should get into real estate investing. And then I'm calling him, and he's like, he was very nice, but I could tell he was like, I can't help you here. Like, this is what I would do. I don't know. Like, stop calling me. Right. So if you can get around mentorship or get around people that are doing the same things, all these problems are like, people are looking at it like, oh man, I've already done that like 20 times. It's like so easy. This is what you do. And then you get into new rooms where those problems become minuscule and you forget about the first ones you had. So I totally agree. I think that's great. I'm wondering, let's just say you were starting all over again. Would you change any direction, anything about what you've done, to get you to this point? It's been kind of a cool journey.
Oh, it's so easy to say now what I would have done. I think if I knew what I knew now, I'd have bought way more properties, like before the interest rates went where they did. But I think we were so focused on such small problems, but at the time they were big problems to us. And, if I knew what I knew now, I would have just not stressed so much about them. And,
sure. Last question for me before we wrap, and maybe Rye has another one, but I just want to ask about, if you could just pick apart, you did a lot of talking about the unit count and a strategy, but if you could just give us an explanation, maybe one deal, start to finish, amount you put down, how you found it, what it cash flows, just some basics. If you could dive into one, I think it would give people an idea of like how to frame this for themselves.
Sure.
Just pick a favorite,
Yeah. So we actually did one recently that was, this is actually extra creative, but it's probably one of my best deals I've done so far, is we did a seller finance down payment as opposed to the full seller financing. So basically what we did is we had a seller who reached out to us on Facebook, found us on Facebook, wanted to work with us. We had been talking for 1.5 years because he knew he was moving out of state in 1.5 years, but he wanted to like have someone in contact. So this is, almost 2-year time frame. And his houses were right next door to each other. He had 2 single family homes, and they were in immaculate condition, like beautiful, very well maintained. And I'm like, okay, how do I get this guy a good price for these houses, but still make it make sense for us? And so because he owed like small balances on both, so subject to didn't really make sense. So what we did is we found a way to where we actually ended up getting a DSCR loan for, I think, 75% of the purchase price. And then we had the seller hold a note for the 25%. So basically we got 2 turnkey properties, and all I paid was closing costs. So these houses, and we actually also bought them under market. So we probably bought them at about 75% of what they're worth right now. And I think we paid maybe like $6-7 in closing costs for the 2. And that's it. So 2 single family home turnkey. And then we did the rent to own strategy on them. So one property we got $5,000 down. The other property we got 10K down. And I think the one after we do, so quick to do on rent to own, with tenant buyers, they're responsible for all maintenance and repairs. This is why we did it for these properties, because we don't have to account for that. And we also are paying a property manager for these ones. So one property will cash flow, I think, about $550 a month, and the other one will cash flow about $400 a month. And we also got all of our money back plus some for what we invested in. So we basically got paid to buy these properties.
Amazing. And then will it be like a 24, 36 month period when they'll actually close on purchasing them from you? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So we do a 2-year lease with option to buy. And then if for some reason they don't buy, then we'll just extend their lease another 2 years. So in the meantime, we're getting that cash flow.
And oftentimes that's not a bad thing for you, just to continue to get the cash flow. So as Brittney was saying, it makes a lot of sense to do rent to own in scenarios. It's where people have maybe a legitimate hiccup in their credit, or they just need time seasoning to try to get into a property because maybe they have they started a business and you need 2 years of your tax returns to be able to qualify. So I love it. I think it's evident that you're onto something here, and I have no doubt that you'll get to that 30 to 40 unit. You'll have 12 paid off, and you'll live off the cash flow, and it'll be great. And it's a grind to get there, but congratulations on the success.
Thank you.
So, a lot of this sounds amazing, right? And I think a lot of people they listen to a podcast episode, maybe they're driving, they're like, wow, that sounds amazing. I wish I could do something like that. And then self-limiting beliefs come in and they're like, well, I don't know, I'm kind of busy, blah, blah, blah. Can you just talk to me about your day-to-day and what it looked like when you were transitioning out of your job, getting into real estate, and then tell me what it looks like today? Just, I'm curious on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis in order to get the leads, in order to take down properties. Like, how are you siphoning this out while still managing your family, just to bring it into real life? Because, we know it takes long hours, but getting organized and being able to just like frame yourself, even when you're full time, is hard. You're like, well, am I being productive today? So just curious if you could lay that on the table for us.
Yeah. The first couple of years are the hardest. They truly are. And you really have to know why you're doing this, because it sucks. Like, it really does. I had, my baby at the time was not sleeping. Like, we're up all hours of the night. I'm working, whatever. I just found pockets of the day where I could do stuff. And if sometimes it was 10 o'clock at night, sometimes I was getting up early in the morning. I knew nothing about construction. And when we first got started, I'd go walk these properties because my husband was working. So I used to, like, when my kids were napping and I'm like holding them, rocking them, I would watch YouTube videos on like home inspections because I wanted to learn and I didn't know what else to do. So it's like, whatever it takes to get there, that's just what you got to do. There's no escape route. And, I'm glad that I put that hard, like, hustling in, because doing everything yourself in the beginning is tough. But now when I go to delegate it out, I know exactly who I'm looking for. Like, I know what I want this person to do. And if I didn't do it myself, that's where I hear all these horror stories of people hiring all these things out, and then they find crappy people because they don't know how to vet them. So you have to know you're going to put in some grunt work for a year or two. And then eventually you get to start snipping little pieces off at a time, but it takes a while to get there. There's no way around it.
Agree. Last question from me is, if someone was looking to start this tomorrow, what advice do you have for them? They can be, just think about like a busy 9-to-5 professional.
So my best advice, and this is what I did, and this is how I learned creative financing, is find somebody that is doing the strategy that you want to do. Figure out your best asset. What are you good at? Are you really organized? Can you do paperwork? Are you really good at talking to people? Whatever that is, find another investor in your area or not in your area or whatever, and say, here's what I'm good at. How can I provide this to you in your business in exchange for your knowledge? That you will learn so much more by helping and working for someone else that's already doing this than you're ever going to learn by yourself. That would be my best strategy. And that's what I did with Jen and Joe. I worked on their team for 2 years. I was their acquisitions manager. I talked to bajillions of sellers, and it really got me to where I am. So that would be my best advice if you're looking to get started, for sure.
That's great advice. Really, really great advice. And I also would say to people, don't be afraid to work for free for a little bit to prove yourself. I mean, I've done it in several areas and aspects of my life, and swallow your pride a little bit and show some value, and it'll come back around. That's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So Brittney, this has been awesome. We really appreciated getting to know you. You're just across the state from us. A 5-hour long, boring drive on the turnpike.
Yeah.
But we appreciate getting to know you. It's been cool. You're on your way. You know, you have a really great business that's growing. What is the best way? Let's say people want to network. They want to learn more about you. They want to do what you're doing, follow your journey. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would say social media. You know, I do take a break from time to time, but I still check it. So Brittney Kznaric on Facebook. Instagram is at @BrittneyK_REI. And message me either of those places and I will get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brittney. This is awesome. We appreciate it. And thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Wealth Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at Wealth Juice Official, where we post daily tips, tricks, and document our own journey towards financial freedom.